Hey everyone, my name is Faith Becker. I'm back with the second video to the video series for Game Changers. Today we're going to be discussing need-based aid and how to receive it, who gives it, and how do you qualify for it. So we're going to go ahead and begin. So for need-based aid, basically it's going to be determined by your family's household income. So first, the two main sources of calculators that sort of determine the type of aid you'll be paying is the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Some schools only use a FAFSA, and then some schools use both. We will have a future video talking about the FAFSA and a future video talking about the CSS profile and what is needed to complete those. So typically both of these profiles will be using your parent or guardian's salaries, their financial assets, which could be savings, if they rent or own the house, and if they own the house, how much is it worth and what is still owed, and other types of income. We'll provide more specific details for the FAFSA and the CS profile in future videos. And another thing that is taken into consideration when calculating how much aid you will receive is student income and student savings. So who provides need-based aid? So there's two main avenues for you to receive need-based aid, and the federal government is one, and that's where the FAFSA comes in. And depending on how much income your parents or guardians bring in, you'll receive a certain amount for the Pell Grant, which again we'll be discussing in a future video about the FAFSA. And then the other avenue on who provides need-based aid is your college. So your colleges will take into consideration what the FAFSA and or the CSS profile suggests that your family can contribute. Now, something that's tricky and a lot of people don't think about is, let's say you are really low income and you're like, I'm really low income, I'm probably going to go to school for free as long as I make good enough grades or ACT score, play varsity. But in fact, if you're just focusing on need-based aid and not merit, we'll talk about merit, scholarship, and aid in another video. If you're just focusing on need-based aid, even if you and your family does not bring in much money, you still may be required to pay for college. And we're going to talk about that in the next slide. So many colleges do not meet 100% of need-based aid. So that means that, let's say the FAFSA says this family can only contribute $5,000. This is your estimated family contribution. Again, we'll talk about that more in the FAFSA video, but it's not necessary to know really right now. But anyway, a net calculator has decided your family can contribute $5,000 to a school that costs $25,000. So that means you need the school. Financially, your family cannot afford to pay $20,000. However, the school you chose only meets 80% of your needs. The college is only going to be able to subsidize or provide $16,000 of that $20,000 need. So your family is already expected to take the $5,000, and now you need to figure out another way to cover this difference with just $4,000. So in reality, the cost of this school is going to be $9,000 for you, which still is not bad at all. But it's just, the point is that when you're looking at colleges, it's helpful to look at what percent need do they meet. And that's really easy. You can just Google how much need does Truman meet. It meets 86% or something like that. I haven't checked, so don't take my word for that. Now, there are some schools in the US who meet 100% need. And when the school says they meet 100% need, you have to check. But typically that means they meet 100% need. So they'll meet this 20,000, and this 20,000 is not going to include loans. So you can look at schools that meet 100% need. Typically these schools are going to be more competitive because that's a really awesome resource to offer, and it's very expensive for schools to do that. But if you have the potential grades, the scores, the extracurriculars, you may be able to go to a school like that. And I'll attach a link to this video for schools that provide 100% need and what that means a little bit more. And that's worth looking into. Typically, those schools are going to be harder to reach schools, but it still doesn't hurt to go ahead and apply. And who knows, you may get in, and it will, if you're low income, it will be very financially affordable for you to go to these schools. So now we're going to talk about need-based aid scholarships. So previously we're talking more about aid in general, not so much as a scholarship, but just like the government and your college says, this is what they can afford themselves, this is what we have to meet or what we'll provide. And now you can look at scholarships, which just can be part of outside organizations, communities. It could be more local or state government providing these scholarships. Basically, it's just extra money you can bring from the outside to your school to help pay for this. And typically, these need-based aid scholarships will have a stipulation of your family needs to make below this income threshold, and you will be eligible to potentially receive the scholarship. Sometimes they'll require an essay to go along with it. Sometimes you need to be part of a specific demographic, maybe a first gen type of college student, um, or some type of religious affiliation. And sometimes need-based aid scholarships will be combined with merit scholarships, which we'll be talking about next week, which basically means your family needs to make below this threshold and you also need to have this GPA or higher. Some resources you might have in your community is your church. Some banks, credit unions, they might offer need-based aid scholarships and or merit-based scholarships. So that's something you just Google search and you can ask your guidance counselors. Something else is your prospective college, like the recruiters or the admissions team might know of other scholarships that you can apply to make that school more affordable for you. That's actually what my little brother did and how he's gotten an extra $1,000 a year to go to Truman. So that's a really great resource. If you do local to community to state scholarships or within that range, they're not going to be as competitive. There are national scholarships that are going to be need-based aid, but they're going to be sort of combined with merit, and those are going to be really competitive, and you can still apply, but they're just going to be way harder to get. Lots of times local scholarships or like scholarships some community businesses in your area offer, people don't even know about. So it might just be a handful of people applying, and you have a really good chance of potentially receiving maybe just $1,000, but $1,000 still can go a long way when trying to reduce your debt or semester payments. Something to keep in mind is even if your family is not inherently low income or struggling or however you want to phrase it, you still can qualify for need-based aid, especially for the competitive colleges I mentioned earlier. For some of them, they'll meet 100% if your family income is below $75,000, which is much more than people may realize. And so they might cover 100% if 75K, but maybe if you're making 125K a year, your family, they're still going to provide a significant amount of aid. So even if you're middle class or even upper middle class, you still can qualify for these. So it doesn't hurt to still reach out to the school, see if there's other need-based aid scholarships you can apply to. So next week's video, we're going to talk about merit scholarships or merit aid, and that can sort of help cover this difference that you've seen between this 20,000, 16,000. We'll talk about how you can apply for those, how do schools offer it, is it something that the government offers or not, how do you qualify, and yes, if you have any questions, comments, or if there's any videos you want me to expand more on in the future, or you have like maybe you have a very specific need-based aid question, I can like address in a future video. In the caption of this video, we'll have a couple suggested links that go into a little bit more detail than what I'm providing. But again, if you want me to talk a little bit more, explain how these things work, I will be happy to address those in future videos. I hope this is helpful, and I look forward to seeing you guys on Thursday and then on Monday. Okay, have a good day.